Welcome to the Event Pro Show, your ultimate guide to the world of corporate events. Whether you're a corporate event planner, experiential marketing pro, producer, technician, or anyone involved in creating exceptional events, this podcast is your go-to resource for valuable insights, expert tips, and inspiring stories from the industry's leading professionals.
Well, thank you for joining us on another episode of the Event Pro Show. I am here with a fantastic events professional, and we're kind of on a run right now with talking to highly creative people. And I've said this before, but it is so funny to me that in corporate events, that's the world that I kind of play in. I run an event production company. Kind of play in that world, and so many people are creative. They were former writers or actors or singers or musicians, and it's just so many creative people in our space. And I have another wonderful creative person today. Christa, I'm going to read your bio really quick.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so our guest today is a seasoned event professional with a wealth of experience in planning, design, and producing high-profile corporate and social events. Over her extensive career, she's held leadership roles managing large teams and departments across industries, specializing in large-scale events, program management, and process engineering. In 2002, Christa transitioned from the corporate world to entrepreneurship, founding Christa Hovis Special Events, and has become a trusted consultant for luxury events, galas, and corporate clients worldwide. A passionate educator, she's developed an event planning and certification program at Greenville Technical College, and among other things too, in helping inspire planners and entrepreneurs navigating the event industry. All right, I got through it, but welcome to the show, Christa Hovis. Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, you've been on the list for a while. I told you before, you didn't know it, but you were on the list for a while. You're a person that I knew we needed to talk to in the show. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me again. It's great.
So speaking of creativity, you are a creative person. Do you think that is one of the reasons why the corporate event space or events in general kind of spoke to you because of the creativity in you? Like you saw that was an outlet for that?
Right, absolutely. You mentioned process engineering. In my background, my foundation is actually in industrial engineering and process engineering. And so in those worlds where you're trying to determine processes that need to be automated or to be manual, you have to be creative. You have to think, to use the terminology, outside the box. And so that creativity in a very mundane way just overflowed when I had the opportunity to begin getting into events. So walking into a convention center where somebody would say, all I see is cement and poles that distract or columns that distract, where I see a blank canvas, and so just meshing that together to be able to understand the logistics and the process and the creative side all just kind of happened for me as I started getting more and more into working on events. It's the creative part that I usually always start with, and then, roll it all up with the whole planning and production and logistical part of it.
Right. I love that. I love that you start from that place, because that's really, from an attendee standpoint, that's kind of what they walk away with.
Right.
They feel that creative energy that you put into it at the beginning. And I think a lot of times we jump ahead to like, okay, what's the budget?
Yeah.
And let's go down all the line
Exactly.
items, and we can't do this. We can't do that. Everything's a checkbox.
Right.
That kind of kills the creativity in it. So.
Exactly. And that's why I'm not always, I'll be honest, it's not like I want to do every event that's out there, because there's plenty for us. But that's why sometimes I'm not a fit for everyone, because some are just down the road. How much is it? What's it going to take or whatever, versus truly exploring the possibilities of what the event can be,
right, and
starting creatively and then scale as you need to get to that budget. So, right. But that happens, fewer times than often, but just sometimes there may not be a fit for that opportunity project.
Okay, well, I'm going to back up just a little bit. I'm going to go way back.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you a question I like to ask everybody, but what is the first event that you can remember attending way back? It could be like as a child.
Yeah. So, that's the way back time machine for me. And I guess it's not so much an event, but an experience for me that really, I guess, probably resonated. And it may sound corny now, but back then was actually going to Walt Disney World for the first time. And it was with the debut of the Tomorrowland and the whole futuristic of things that you just hadn't even thought of, and
Yeah.
seeing it and the whole production and the lighting and the theming of the whole park. I think that stayed with me from a child, and
Yeah.
kind of came back as I got older and started getting involved in adults and seeing branding and creativity and lighting and all
Yes.
that.
Yeah. I grew up in Orlando, and so like no kid that I grew up with ever paid for tickets. It was back in the day when if you knew someone, you could get walked into the park.
Right.
But heavy creative
Yes.
and execution
Yes.
over time, like every day was
Yep.
executed perfectly. And
Yep.
so a lot of those people, as we grew up,
Yeah.
ended up working, at Walt Disney or becoming an Imagineer
Yeah.
or something like that.
Right.
Incredible place for
Yes.
creativity, for sure.
Right. Hate I ruined that with not knowing that you were in Orlando, but it was at the time. I mean, again, they think of everything from the time you get there to
Yep.
the time you end, which is the life cycle of an event.
It's the perfect event.
Yes.
Every day.
Yes.
From the time that you drive onto the property,
Yep.
like and leave. It's amazing. It is
Yeah.
an amazing experience.
Yeah.
So that was pretty impactful, huh?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes.
So from that, what was the first time that you went to something and you were like, I want to do this. This is what I want to do because you had a career before this, and there was a transition that happened.
Yeah. So I was very fortunate. We're recording today in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so if for people, where you're listening, but we have a team called the Carolina Panthers here. Well, that dream for the Carolina Panthers started with Jerry Richardson. And Jerry Richardson was, I guess you could say, my first professional boss. My first job out of college was working with his company at the time, which had been Spartan Foods, then became TW Services, and then became Flagstar, which people may not know was based in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and was the headquarters for 5 global divisions. Hardee's,
one of the big buildings.
The only big building.
Yeah.
Hardee's, Denny's, Quincy's, El Pollo Loco, Canteen, and Volume Services, all those divisions. So you say, well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, for the first time, that one little town was the center point for all of these huge general sessions, all these huge breakout meetings, all these huge product launches with Coca-Cola. And
so you were dealing with like infrastructure issues and stuff. Like, where am I going to put everybody? Where are we going to do these meetings?
But they were doing them. And if we didn't happen to Spartanburg, it would happen in some other location. But this is when an organization had their own internal travel department with buses, fleets. They had their own photography team. They had their own in-house AV team. Here I am coming in like, what is all this, and seeing these huge productions, not knowing at the time, and from everything from stockholder meetings to multi-day corporate retreats with all these different divisions. That's what I got a taste of. That's what I got to experience. And then when it came time for me to go on my own down this path of entrepreneurship, what do I want to do? I want to do what I was a part of in that organization, and seeing all that and doing things like that.
You caught the bug.
Yeah.
You caught the bug.
Yes. And you have to love it. We have to love that bug for sure.
Yeah, you do. You do. And I think there is this point in time that this story is a little similar to other people I've talked to, where they're at a large org and they're having to figure out what hasn't been done before. They have to walk through that fire. And at the other end, people either quit or they're like, I think I like this.
Yeah.
And it's just a personality type, I think, is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
You seem to be really passionate about education, the next generation, people coming up in the industry, which is interesting to me because you had to kind of teach yourself a lot of these skills or do like a translation from skills you had to this industry.
Right.
But now you're the one that can actually formalize some of that. So as an educator, what have you learned as you've taught the next generation of event professionals? What type of lessons have you learned?
Oh, lessons. Good. Well, I mean, I would say, one of the biggest lessons I try to convey is, you've got to always stay ahead of the game and keep yourself knowledgeable about what's going on within the industry that you want to work in. So knowing things such as back in the day when you said I had to learn things on my own, that's back when, organizations such as ILEA, International Live Events Associations, was just starting. MPI Carolinas, or MPI, was not that long, in its duration. So we didn't have a lot of that foundation to go on. So we had to use what was there for that. And so it's always, always be communicating or networking with those that do things either better than you do or do things in a way that you want to surround yourself and make them part of your your team, but also do the research. I often find a lot of my students in the past, or even those that I mentor today, may not have done a lot of the necessary research in terms of what it takes to be in the business, either on your own or just working as an event planner. There's a lot of serious side to this. We're talking about, emergency, security, risk management, and all those types of things. It's not just, having people over to your house, which you still have to think about those things too. But it's just, always making yourself, educating yourself, taking the time to do that for what it is, your passion or your professional job.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's part of, and when you teach people, just showing that side of it too.
Yes.
Like it's not just the fun side you can see, but there's another part of risk mitigation. Taking you're a steward of these attendees for the hours that they're there.
Yes.
And it's up to you to make sure they're safe.
Yeah.
That is a good point. I think that's something that you wouldn't naturally think about.
No, absolutely. So it's kind of like
doing
blinders.
Events, you start seeing that.
Yeah.
one good emergency, and then you're like, what was that? What's that plan? You're also very creative, though. So you and I were on a panel last year, and I don't remember the exact question. I wish I did, but I remember looking down going, oh, that was really creative. Like your answer was like really good.
Yeah.
So that might've been the first time. It's like, okay, she goes on the list. I want to talk to her a little bit more. But when you begin with designing an event for a client, maybe a new client, where do you start? Like, what are the questions that you're asking?
Well, so a lot of times, again, in this industry, there's a lot of A-type personalities, which I'm one of those. So I have to really challenge myself to sit and listen to the client, but I really make it very purposeful to listen. And so I don't really have to ask a lot of questions. It's usually open-ended questions about, when you think about this event that you're wanting myself or my team and all of my vendor partners to help with, what do you see? How do you envision that running? How do you envision that working? And usually from there, I'm picking up on, what is their baseline of their expectations for, decor, what their expectations are for, the type of food. I'm just listening to them, and then I'm taking notes. And usually that helps me know, like, how much they know about the planning process, how much they know about maybe how things cost or don't cost, which, there's a level setting that I have to do there. But it's really trying to just listen and pick up on those cues that lets me know which direction I need to go to next in my questioning to help make sure that I have identified the key requirements to making that event successful for that client. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What if there was an example in your past of an event that you feel like it checked all the boxes for you from creativity, where you did this with a client, you heard them, and then you were able to execute something and they were ecstatic about it. The guests loved it. It's just one of your favorite experiences.
Ooh, I thought you were going to trip me up and ask me when it didn't work.
Well, that'll be next.
Yeah. Well, I can give you a 2-for-1 then, because
right, cool.
I'm going to come off a recent example. I had the opportunity to work on multiple projects here a couple of months ago. And the output of the project was extraordinary. It was like, this is the first, these were the recurring themes. This is the first time we've ever had an event like this that was this great. This is the first time we've ever had, this is the best of all time. We've been doing, so you love hearing that.
Yeah.
However, to get to that end point, it was a hard start at the beginning in terms of understanding requirements and understanding the gap in terms of the internal team and teams that I was working with. There was different levels of understanding of what the event planning process is, what your lead time needs to be in order to have a quality program, and then the impact of not having timely decisions and how that impacts your timeline, from pricing, from planning, from staffing. So that part was, I had to really, really take myself to a very new beginning or new level. Like I hadn't been this, I didn't realize how far of a gap in their understanding of the process for some
Yeah.
of the team members was. So I had to really, I was ready to jump in and just go versus not realizing I was going to have to crank it down and stop and pause and really have to level set and educate of the impacts of the project line. So it was a kind of bumpy start. So, but the outcome was tremendous and tremendous home runs on multiple levels that we did. So hopefully that was a 2-for-1.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that was uncomfortable at
Yes,
the beginning.
yes,
But
absolutely.
there is a certain tolerance between the way that we want a client to be and the way that the reality it actually
Right.
is. And I think the trick sometimes is figuring out when it's a true red flag
Exactly.
or it's just a new client relationship that you're trying to work through and
Yep.
how they work
Right.
too. Because I don't know if it's not always like this is right or wrong.
Yes.
You're just feeling how that relationship's going to work. And so that can be challenging.
Yes.
And it is hard to know when it's like, when do you put your foot down and say like, hey, we can't,
Right.
I can't do it now.
Right.
This is the line.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
a tough one. I'm glad that
Yes,
worked out.
it did. But that was the first time really. And the reason I pointed out as because at first I was questioning, what am I doing wrong? Why, what am I, how am I impacting? And not that I wasn't, but what I did do wrong, is, realize that there was a gap in understanding and I wasn't communicating that because I thought that the level set understanding of the team was, up to I don't want to say up to the level in terms of where I was, but understood what happens next part.
Yeah.
And I hadn't stopped to explain that.
Yeah.
And so again, so it was just much as my part as it was on the team's, side of it. But we overcame. And again, like I said, multiple hits, multiple home runs on that.
That's really interesting. I feel like a lot of times stopping and realizing that all service providers, I think in events especially, a lot of service providers are consultants.
Yeah.
You're not, we're not used car salespeople
Yep.
here. We're not trying to upsell you.
Nope.
We're trying to be a consultant and having to pull people through a process, you're educating them along the way.
Right.
And so it's a constant, like, we need to do it, but I also need to be your guide in this,
Right.
and that's
Yeah.
part of it.
And that's the title. When my accountant asked what my title is, it's Chief Event Consultant. I work with a lot of companies that either don't have an existing event base or they need more tenured expert and experience. So yeah, I've been a consultant my entire career before events and now have just continued on that pathway because you're exactly right. We're providing counsel and consult on what the best practices are for the event.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question because I've seen this happen over and over again.
Uh-oh.
So if there's a client, if somebody's listening right now, and
Yes.
they're like, look, we have our first event. We're bringing in 200 people from wherever,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to go to Phoenix. And my assistant is just going to plan the whole thing. They don't ever do events, but they're pretty organized. They're going to do a great job. What would you say to that person? How would you counsel them?
So my counsel would be when your assistant is booking that flight to go, well, first of all, is she doing a site visit? And if she is, if you're wanting to contract me to do that, I'll pay for my own ticket to go with her on that site visit to make sure that we have everything that we need to, that there's eyes and ears on the ground when you're siting that location to make sure that it's going to work from an AV perspective, from an F&B perspective. That would be my initial response because I want to be able to be in there to see it from the beginning to the end before they contract as well.
Yeah.
If that's not the opportunity, then I would say, well, my counsel would be for something as important as this event for you in a destination where it's not here in your city where you're based, I would recommend you probably would want to bring somebody in that has the knowledge level that you need to match the investment level that you're going to invest for an event to this caliber.
Right.
And
the reason why you say that is talk about what you've seen where people have decided not to hire a consultant like yourself, and they have just used an employee that's day job is something totally different, and they're already overtaxed out the gate.
Oh, yeah.
That's number one. But how have you seen that kind of that train go down the tracks?
Yeah. So unfortunately, it still happens so much right now today. I've had many recent projects that I've worked on where that is exactly the case. And so again, being the consultant that I am, and obviously being the professional and what you guys do, you always tend to give a little bit more to the projects that you work on, even though you may not charge them, because, in the end, it's about the end product and the relationship that you build with that client. So something that I recently did, because it was that very scenario where there were multiple people that were not responsible for events, that had to plan events. It was not their forte at all. They didn't know, they don't know about vetting vendors. They don't know who are the best to reach out to, but they're doing what they're supposed to do just to check it off the list. So those events went ahead and were executed, and they were fine. But at the end of my project that I was working on, when I didn't get those other events, I just wrote up kind of like as a nice thank you, here's a kind of overview from what I saw of how, whether it's me helping you in the future or your own team, of how you need to best streamline and think about these events that you're assigning to people that are not experts, and how they, here are some best practices, and here are some cheat sheets that you can share with the team on how they can, if they're going to have to do these events and you're not going to bring in somebody else to do them that knows how to do them, then here are some things that they need to be aware of, so that you guys aren't leaving anything on the table as far as money. And you also aren't bringing in folks that may jeopardize or impact your business in a negative way.
Yeah.
So that's how I handled it when I didn't get the project. But fortunately, in this case, I was working another one. But and even the times when I don't have a project that I'm working on, I still try to provide some feedback to say, hey, if they're going to do it, here's some things they need to keep in mind. And then now I have had situations where they say, okay, bye, Christa, we're going to get, Sally or Joe to start working on this. And then about 6 weeks later, I get a phone call or a text, and they say, Christa, could we have you come back in? So I've had that situation too, So, but my thing is, if I see a train wreck happening in the midst as it's being described, I try to offer, consulting advice to help their organization.
Right.
So
I just have seen it so often, and I'm like, I really wish you would just hire someone like Christa, because this would be so much smoother, and the apparent savings that you're doing, actually, they will probably save you money in the long run.
I will tell you one thing that I am seeing more and more, and I don't know about in Charlotte, I do travel a lot, but I am seeing in other cities, is where particularly venues, and you may see this for the venues that y'all do, more and more are providing that you have a professional planner in the mix before they will book your event.
Yes,
so I've been glad to see that part of it. So I'm seeing that more and more when I go to other cities.
Right. Because they're tired of having events that aren't well organized.
Exactly. And don't know what they're doing. So that's a good trend to have.
All right. I'm going to switch gears here. I'm going to ask you a few random questions here. Are there any emerging technologies in the event space that you're excited about? And that could be on not just, I think of AV all the time, but there's other technologies as far as registration, ticket managing people through the space, data, all sorts of stuff. So is there anything that you're seeing right now that is interesting to you? Yeah.
I mean, so, everybody's talking about AI, and in some cases people are tired of it. I get, kind of nauseated, not hearing about it, but it's sometimes when it's the only thing, but it is a good tool. I use it for my event design. I actually was using it yesterday in an event design concept that I'm going to be presenting tomorrow. So for some of the chat GTP or some of the other where you have to have a subscription to purchase. So I don't see that going away. I had another someone asked me the other day and said, well, do you see the event industry being impacted by AI? I said, if anything, I only see the technology helping all of us, from a vetting contracts. I use it to help either improve contracts when I'm sourcing locations and venues, or F&B. So I see it helping. I haven't seen it hindering that much, unless it gets into the back of the house and the catering side, where it's, maybe taking jobs that way.
Right.
So I only see it being positive. So to answer your question, I see that for the distance technology has made as it relates to events in the last, say, 10 years to now, with customization, with applications, with, AI, I only see that magnifying amplifying and just growing so fast, but in a much smaller time.
Yeah.
So what you see today are applications, that used to be just for registration, but now the registrations are getting to where you can do so much more customization with them.
Mm-hmm.
Different platforms for booking flights. I don't book flights for my clients, but I try to stay in the mix of platforms that are out there when they don't have their own travel department to book their flights.
Mm-hmm.
So the easiness of some of these platforms that are out there, I'll introduce them to the product, and then create conversations with the vendor and supplier to help, because that not only helps them, but it helps me to help streamline the rest of the production for the event.
Right.
So everything is getting better, and the good news is like, I won't name any names, but there's some big platforms out there that used to be the only one out there,
Mm-hmm.
and now they're not the only one out there,
Right.
because, and so what that's forced the big players to do is to then create their own little subcategory products
Mm-hmm.
that now you may not want to spend all this money, but we may have an event in a day box type product that we can give you for things. So it's making things a little bit more affordable for clients that don't want to purchase a whole license to have this platform of this application. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
For there. And
Absolutely.
so only getting better is what I see happening.
I
from
agree.
that.
It's a little bit of a Wild West right now,
Yeah.
especially in the software space, AI
Yes.
space. But I agree. I think that, especially referring to AI, it comes up a lot, but really it's just being integrated in a lot of creative ways. People are finding how to actually take the novelty of it and have useful applications.
Right.
And where I've seen it lately be really cool is you already, like you're a creative person, you have maybe a structure,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can use AI to kind of flesh it out. So it's not like, you're do my job,
Yes.
like that. It's that it just kind of takes what you're doing and fleshes it
Exactly.
out, and that's really cool to me,
Yeah.
because it speeds things
Right.
up. It is an original concept,
Yeah.
but it's at helping you do your job
Right.
faster.
Yeah. Well, and also technology as it relates to, and I'm sure you could talk for volumes on how it's impacted, the products that you can offer from an AV perspective. I mean, what used to be, this big and, footprint that it takes up is, smaller, and you get way more out of it.
Yeah.
Those types of things have just been incredible, and only see that just getting faster and bigger
That's
and
right.
better as well.
That's
so,
right.
Yeah.
More efficient. You
Yeah.
can do more with less.
Yes.
Which is great for everybody. I believe it's
Yeah.
great for everybody, because I think in the world that is so social media connected, there's still the reason why we do what we do. People still need to get together.
Yes.
And like that's why we do this.
Yes.
But I think things are becoming niches where you can talk to everyone in the world at the same time.
Yes.
Right? But nobody will listen. But
Right.
you can create events for smaller and smaller specialties and
Mm-hmm.
kind of find your community, find your people. And because of that, you need to do it really efficiently as
Yes.
a planner. And you can do it with these tools. I mean, you could be a one-person shop and
Yeah.
you could put together a whole beautiful event. That's
Right.
cool. That's
Yeah.
really cool for
Right.
everybody. Everybody
Absolutely.
wins.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as creative event ideas,
Mhm.
you would be the person I call. You'd be the person I text, whatever. Hey, I need some creative ideas.
Yeah.
Like, what are some cool things you've seen lately or you've done that are like that you're excited about in your events?
Creative. That's a good question. I hate to be specific, but my mind creatively is in a where I'm focused on one project I'm about to present tomorrow. And so
I don't want to take any secrets
no,
here.
No, it's not secrets, but it's just like it may not be applicable to others. But what I'm trying to do in this particular scenario, again, I do stay rather out in the industry, networking and keeping myself abreast of what other companies and organizations are doing for their conventions and their conferences. So I'm actually working with it. So what I'm excited about, because that's the thing, as a creative, you have to get excited. And if you're excited when you deliver those creative ideas, the end client picks up on that and they get excited, they see the vision. So right now, I have a client that's, you were talking about, since COVID, but you were talking about live events and in-person events. Well, since COVID, probably all of my events now are all live. I have maybe rarely any that are hybrid anymore.
Right.
All of them are in person. And so each client, like the one I'm getting ready to present to, some creative ideas on, this is their first time really doing a larger scale conference. And so I'm trying to introduce, just because you've always done a conference this way, there's new newer things and new concepts for you to do when you start thinking about bringing in 500 people for 5 days or 4 days. So I'm excited about introducing them to, nothing against general sessions. I love a general sessions as much as you do. But for me, it's those creating those smaller micro sessions that they've never done in a creative and branded way, to think about their delivery that's short and concise, because their attendees are at a different age. Attendees want different things. And so creating those different concepts, as well as unique experiences that they've never done. So for example, this is something that I'm proposing for them, is that when their attendees land, they're mostly all female, they will be picked up and they'll be greeted. Not so different. But when they get on the bus will be branded. They'll have their little welcome branded snack, so that they because if they've just gotten off, where they can includes their wipe and their everything that they can do. But then when they land at the hotel, they're going to go into they'll check. They don't even have to go to the front desk. They'll go straight to a gifting lounge, where there'll be someone that will offer a massage, chair massage, fresh champagne popped for them, and they'll get to pick out the gift that they want to be able to take back with them. And then once they get up to the room, there'll be flowers beside their bed. Those don't sound like new things, but it's new things that those clients have never done before that you can then take and expand upon. So those are just some touches, but then there's other ideas that
I love it.
I can add on to that as well, but those are just from a conference perspective. My brain is there at the moment.
So you got to follow me on my little logic here.
Yes.
So when I've always thought that, like, okay, so if you hear a song, if it's a well-written song, people connect with it. No one's thinking of what microphone they used or what technology they used to record it with. It's just a good song. And with your idea, like, you can talk about high tech and low tech ideas. I think conversation right now is a lot of, like, we were just talking about AI, software, the latest gear, blah, blah, blah. But using a low tech, and what I mean by that is this is just using creativity and delivering something with the same tools in a different way.
Right.
It's the same thing as, like, a good song is a good song. A good idea is a good idea. It's not about the tech every time.
Right.
So there's still such a need when you're planning an event or doing events to just use creativity.
Exactly.
And then take the risk, the risk and do it, put it out there. I think people connect with, there's something magical when people just get in a room and you can just have, like, a new way of formatting. And I like your idea of the micro sessions.
Yes.
Such a cool idea. Again, it's just creativity.
Yeah.
There's nothing different. Like, technology didn't just come out where you're like, we can do micro events now.
Yes.
We could have done that a long time ago. You're just reformatting it in a creative way.
Yeah.
And I love that. I think that's part of, like, the magic of what you do.
Right.
Technology is a tool.
Yeah.
But it's not everything.
Well, and I'll just finish by saying the second phase of that is their theme is yesterday, today, and tomorrow. But the other second theme that I'm having to work off of is today is tomorrow. So their opening night event is all going to be about the future. They're going to experience the future with all different types of futuristic experiences, activations. Their next day, it's going to be about yesterday, where we're going to take them back to an old event off premise that's all about old, where it was maybe done in the 1800s and did things certain ways. And then they come back, and then it's about today, and we'll be doing an event that's all around the current times. But so we're tying all that in together, back to their brand, telling their story, and then doing all these little nuances with AV and entertainment and food and beverage to tie all those events together.
Right.
Yeah.
Love it.
So very high level.
Well, I'd buy it. I'd buy the plan. Well, real quick, you talked a little bit at the beginning about risk mitigation. So if you were explaining to someone or mentoring someone, like, what would be the first steps to developing a great risk mitigation plan for an event?
Right. So again, I think we talked off camera and off radio about my certifications. And so as certified project management, you need to know how to make a project plan. There's a lot of, I try to tell people that I am mentoring or former students that if you can go and, become a CSEP, they have a whole section on risk mitigation. What are the best practices that you should do? In my old days, we did it in quality assurance and process control and how to mitigate. So I merged all those together. So for me, I try to explain, you have to start from the very beginning, whatever type of event it is, you have to start. The fun stuff's there, the pretty stuff's there, but seriously, you have to always be thinking about the safety and risk that can happen with your event.
Yeah.
So for me, I just came off of doing an incentive that was in another country. So from the very beginning, before I started that project, I'm already having to work with the state departments to see if there are any travel alerts for that destination before we select that destination. And then once we're getting close to that, how soon are there anything impacting that we need to make our travelers aware of once they get there? And then coming back to an on-site event, general sessions, if I'm looking at that convention center, I'm part of my pre-meetings, my site meetings that I'm meeting at the convention center. I'm meeting with the head of security. I'm meeting with the head that interacts with the city to understand if there's anything that's going on or anything that we need to be aware of from our programs, anything that we need to mitigate in terms of setup. How many, making sure that we have enough space for any impaired or physically challenged folks with, when we're setting up things. So those are just some very tiny examples, but the point is you have to always be thinking about it in the background, as well as incorporating the what if scenarios as part of your project plan once you're on site, from your production schedule to your run of shows, of what you would do. Who are you going to contact? Who's your first point of contact when you need to communicate, whatever that may be.
And is this, once you develop that, do you deliver it to the client? It's like an actual deliverable. You say, this is the strategy for risk mitigation, or how do you make it known to the team?
Yeah. So that's two things there. Sometimes the client does not ask for it, and usually they don't. They're assuming that if they're contracting you and your vendors and your suppliers, that you've been vetted and you know how to operate that. So if it's on site at a convention, you're working that infrastructure as it goes from the procedure internally between your team and them. If you're at a hotel, same thing, you're working with operations and security and things like that. So what the level is, you communicate it, and then you communicate it with your team prior to and on site. So in case of emergency, we contact this person or whatever that it is on site. The client, I've only had a few, probably in the pharma industry. It depends maybe on industry where it is that we're doing something where they actually may want to see an actual security alert process that I would work with the vendor on to present that to them. But you have to always account for it and plan for it. And then as far as communicating again with the team, usually on site at your convention centers where you're further apart, everything from apps to, cell phones, or, we're on the headset and we've got a different channel that, channel 3 is for emergency only, and it goes straight to security. It goes straight to this person or this person. And usually we've communicated that before the event. And then if there's anything daily that we need to be aware of as we're getting ready to execute for the day. That's such a big topic. Even on a social note, I'll just elaborate for those that are maybe listening that maybe just plan social events. To tell you it's real. Some of my colleagues know this, but unfortunately, I never want it to happen to anybody else. But I had a very large, high-profile wedding that I had was planning and producing for 600 people destination, and literally less than 24 hours before the actual wedding event was to take place on this property, a large portion of the wedding party were killed in a car crash less than 100 yards from the event location. As we were doing the sound check with AV and the sound check with the van and had done a final check with the lighting, we were informed. And so literally our event site turned into a triage and a collection site for items from the crash. So you talk about having a plan and communicating and having to communicate to 600 people that were showing up that didn't know that this had happened when they're showing up for the wedding. Mm-hmm. So again, it's not just corporate events. It's not just conventions. Things can happen, and you have to have that. What do you do in case of, always in the back of your mind, as well as some type of documented plan that you can share with your team before you do an event.
Anytime you have a large group of people together.
Exactly right. Happen. Yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah,
awful.
I know,
And things happen, but you were prepared.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
and a lot of that came into play with the project planning and the calm head, and then having the right vendors that you can communicate and talk to that have been part of your team, and coming up with a plan and working with, of course, in that case was the officials and the, highway patrol and everything like that for
Mhm.
the event. So they ended up being a longtime client of mine that I've been in touch
Since
with
then.
since then.
Okay.
But again, social, corporate, or whatever, large crowds or even small crowds, you have to be prepared and have that in the back of your mind. So that's the downer part, but it's the important part.
Right. It's the downer part, accepting that kind of stuff happens. If you
Exactly.
don't have a plan, that would be
Exactly.
the real
Right.
downer part.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
and I'm sure that's why you have a long-term client there. So a question that comes up often, or there are some challenging venues in the country.
Mhm.
Geographically, there's some places that are kind of known as like challenging places to be. But how do you create win-wins in venues with challenging rules? So, like for example, in-house AV, or food and beverage minimums, or load-in time restrictions, or union expectations. These types of
Yes.
things. So how do you manage that, and how do you create win-wins instead of just telling your client we're avoiding it?
So now, Seth, remember you're talking to a creative person. So having limitations is really hard for a creative person to have to deal with. So I say that in jest, but at the same time, oftentimes that's why when I propose full service event production, not in the sense of AV, but from soup to nuts, I always try to request that I'm the one selecting the location for the client, because I want to go cite that to see what are those things that may make us make the decision that we're not going to go there. So
Right.
that's first and foremost.
Mhm.
So if I'm identifying those things, because we know what union can impact budget,
Mhm.
and we know when there's minimums that are, beyond budget. So as soon as you can notify that, then that's going to help take that off the list. So sight unseen is not a best practice, and I discourage that from clients. So being able to get into that and take that one off the list, so that's easy. But when you're handed that and you
Right.
have that, if the contract hasn't been negotiated yet on all those different elements, because, like for a convention, you're dealing with, not usually most cases, not just one, you're
Right.
dealing with multiple, including AV and everybody else, security, there's a contract. So for the F&B, when they're not, when their minimums are higher, that's where, if there's still room for negotiations where you can, cut this, minimize that, before you go to contract, that's one way to create a win-win where they're still making money and you're still trying to please the client. When there's load-in restrictions, you're trying to work with all of your vendors that have the box trucks that need the same slots to get in, and working with the dock manager and working with them with what those solutions are. So maybe they're like, well, again, and that's where you got to treat people equal and make them your friend, because they're all a part of your event when you're working event. So that dock master who's there every day, he may say, hey, Christa, I can't get all of your slots in at 6:00, but I can stage them over there and they can cart over, start carting over the smaller stuff, so try to make it a win-win to where it's still meeting my timeline and it's still helping to meet the vendor's timeline when those things come up. And then the decorations and things like that. So that's where, when you're limited and they have like, you can't do the confetti cannons, and the client really wanted the confetti cannons on that last cue when they announced, well, what are the other alternatives that they'll go with? And so normally that's where I get with my AV partners and say, okay, we can't do the confetti, but what can you do? And lo and behold, they're going to come up with a wonderful solution to, project something on the screens or do something there. So that's where you can make it a win-win for, in those scenarios. But otherwise, just try to avoid those and identify those things in the siting process.
So if you can't do that, you're getting in there trying to work on the contract. You're treating people like people.
Yes.
Shocking,
yes.
I know. And you have good partners.
Yep.
That you can work with. And hopefully maybe long-term partners that you just have relationships.
Yep.
You help each other
out.
Long-term,
that's the key in treating everybody as part of the team.
I agree. That's the key to all of this. And I think that the more successful events I see, the better the relationships. It is a relationship business. I don't think that's just unique to North Carolina.
No, I agree.
I think that's just how humans work.
Yep.
They buy things from people that they like and that help. And so that goes back to, you said, a lot of us will give even more, even if a client's not going to that comes from like this intuitive thing of like, sometimes it comes back to you, but either way, you just kind of wish people success,
Yes.
And you're not out to get as much as you can. You give
Right.
too. So
Yeah.
I have really enjoyed our conversation.
Same here.
Christa.
Yep.
Thank you so much. If people want to learn more about you, what should they do? Where should they go?
Yeah. So obviously from a professional, well, they're all professional elements, but platform at Christa Hovis on LinkedIn, at Christa Hovis on Insta, and then Facebook, if you want to see the things that I post for my 94-year-old grandmother.
I love that.
At Christa Hovis Harris is where you can find me. So,
Okay. Well,
yeah.
thank you for being
Thank
a guest.
you.
It's been a
Yes.
great conversation.
Absolutely.
And thank you for joining us. I've been Seth Macchi. I am your host of the Event Pro Show. And you can find our episodes just about once a week on your preferred podcast platform. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you on the next one. The Event Pro Show is a production of LEMG, video by Nick Barrett, audio and post-production by Prince Thompson. You can learn more about us at lemg.live.